In the spring of 2005, a highly respected, deeply religious woman named Genevieve Sanders moved into a quiet, upscale neighborhood in Texas. She was charming, soft-spoken, and claimed to be a grieving widow looking for a fresh start with her young daughter. Within months, she had integrated herself perfectly into the local church, winning the trust of every single family in the community. But one Sunday morning, Genevieve vanished. No note, no warning, no trace. When the local police began investigating the empty house, they didn't just find a missing person case. They found a black hole. The social security number she used belonged to a woman who died in the 1970s. The passport was a masterpiece of forgery, and the daughter she was raising didn't legally exist. Within 48 hours, the FBI took over the case, and what they uncovered sent shockwaves through federal law enforcement. Genevieve Sanders wasn't a grieving widow. She wasn't even Genevieve. She was Dana Lawrence, a criminal mastermind who had spent 30 years living as a ghost, operating under 19 different stolen identities across 15 states. She didn't just steal money, she stole entire lives. She conned wealthy men out of millions, manipulated the family court system, and left a trail of devastated targets who realized, too late, that they had married a phantom. This is the dark story of the most elusive female con artist in modern American history. A woman who proved that with enough psychological manipulation, you can become whoever you want to be and destroy anyone who gets in your way. To truly understand Dana Lawrence, you have to look past the money she stole and look directly at her terrifying level of psychological control. Most con artists run from the law. Dana Lawrence ran toward a different target: the human need for companionship. For 3 decades, from the early 1980s until her final arrest, Dana operated like a professional actress in a never-ending psychological thriller. She targeted successful, vulnerable men, doctors, lawyers, corporate executives, men who had money, but more importantly, men who were looking for love. She didn't just date them. She constructed elaborate, bulletproof personas tailored to their exact emotional weaknesses. If a man wanted a traditional conservative wife, she became a devout churchgoer. If a man wanted an independent, high-flying businesswoman, she forged corporate credentials from top-tier firms. She married them. She convinced them to sign over their bank accounts, their properties, their entire financial futures. And then, when the money dried up or the law got too close, she would orchestrate a dramatic disappearance, completely wiping her digital footprint, only to reappear 3 states away with a new face, a new accent, and a new victim. By the time federal authorities compiled her master file, the sheer statistics of her fraud were mind-boggling. 19 confirmed aliases, over 12 fraudulent social security numbers, multiple marriages under different legal names. She had defrauded financial institutions, private investors, and individual families out of an estimated multi-million-dollar fortune. And yet, the money wasn't her greatest crime. Her greatest crime was what she did to the children caught in her web. Dana Lawrence systematically used her own kids and the children of her victims as props to solidify her fake identities. She dragged them across the country, changing their names overnight, forcing them to lie to strangers, and destroying their psychological stability just to keep her 30-year run alive. This is the deep dive into the mind of a predator who didn't just manipulate the system, She mastered the dark art of social engineering, leaving an entire generation of broken lives in her wake. Every ghost has an origin story. And before Dana Lawrence was a name whispered in federal law enforcement offices, she was just a young woman named Dana Sue Gray, born in Southern California. Dana didn't grow up in poverty. She wasn't forced into a life of crime by desperate circumstances. Instead, she possessed something far more dangerous, an innate, chilling talent for psychological mimicry. From a very young age, she realized that people don't actually see you. They only see the version of you that you choose to present to them. In the early 1980s, while she was still in her 20s, Dana committed her first official act of identity theft. It wasn't an elaborate high-tech hack. It was simple, analog, and terrifyingly effective. She stole the social security number and birth certificate of a woman named Cheryl, a woman who had recently moved out of the state. With this new identity, Dana didn't just hide, she expanded. She used Cheryl's clean record to secure high-limit credit cards, open multiple bank accounts, and rent luxury apartments she had no intention of paying for. For nearly 3 years, she lived a life of absolute luxury, funded entirely by a woman who had no idea her identity was being drained across the country. But it was in 1985, when the local police finally caught up with her trail, that Dana discovered her true superpower. Most criminals panic when they are cornered by the law. Dana did the exact opposite. She walked into a California courtroom, looked the judge directly in the eye, and gave a performance that would define the next 30 years of her life. She didn't deny the fraud. Instead, she manufactured a devastating, heartbreaking story of psychological trauma. She wept. She trembled. She played the role of a deeply broken, vulnerable victim of circumstance so perfectly that the judge completely fell for the act. Instead of a heavy prison sentence, she was given probation and a gentle warning. As she walked out of that courthouse, a free woman, something shifted inside her mind. She didn't see the probation as a second chance to live a straight life. She saw it as a proof of concept. She had just weaponized human empathy to defeat the American justice system. She realized that if she could fool a trained federal judge with nothing but a fake name and a tearful story, she could fool anyone. The woman known as Dana Sue Gray vanished that afternoon, and the phantom with 19 lives was officially born. By the early 1990s, Dana Lawrence had completely refined her criminal blueprint. She was no longer just a small-time identity thief escaping bad checks. She had evolved into a high-level social engineer, and her strategy relied on a deep understanding of human vulnerability. Dana didn't look for her targets in dark alleys or underground networks. Instead, she looked for them in places filled with trust, specifically affluent suburban churches and tight-knit religious communities. She knew that in these spaces, people inherently lowered their guard. She would arrive in a new town, usually under a soft, comforting alias like Susan or Mary. She always wore conservative, elegant clothing and carried herself with an air of quiet humility. To the pastors and congregation members, she was a deeply spiritual, hard-working single mother who had suffered immense tragedy. Sometimes she claimed her husband had died in a horrific accident. Other times, she hinted at escaping an abusive relationship. She would immediately volunteer for church charity events, bake sales, and childcare programs. Within weeks, she wasn't just a member of the community. She was an indispensable, trusted insider. And once that trust was locked in, she selected her primary targets: Dana specifically looked for successful men, established business owners, or lonely widowers, or divorced executives who were desperate for emotional connection. She would love bomb them, matching their values perfectly, becoming the exact ideal partner they had been praying to find. But as soon as the wedding rings were on, the trap would snap shut. Dana would take total control of the household finances. She would convince her new husbands that with her background in business, she could manage their investments better. She forged power of attorney documents, opened secret lines of credit using their names, and methodically drained their life savings. If a bank questioned a large withdrawal, she would show up with forged corporate letters or fake matching identification, talking her way past the tellers with absolute poise. By the time her husbands noticed that hundreds of thousands of dollars were missing, Dana would already be sensing the danger. She wouldn't stay to fight or explain. She would pack her bags in the middle of the night, take the children, and vanish into thin air, leaving a financially ruined, emotionally broken man behind, wondering if the woman he loved had ever existed at all. As the years turned into decades, Dana's confidence morphed into dangerous arrogance. She was no longer just stealing money from wealthy men, she was stealing the very concept of family. Every time she fled a city in the middle of the night, she didn't just leave a ruined husband behind. She took her children with her. Sometimes her own biological children, sometimes the children of her victims. She would cross state lines, pull into a cheap motel, and force the kids to memorize brand new names before morning. She would look them in the eye and tell them that bad people were chasing them, that if they told anyone their real names, they would be taken away forever. She weaponized their fear to keep them completely silent. They weren't just her children. They were her alibis. A single mother with kids always looks innocent to a bank teller, or a local pastor, or a new wealthy target. But by the late 1990s, the sheer volume of her wreckage began to catch up with her. You can't leave a trail of bankrupted executives across 15 states without someone noticing a pattern. The turning point came when one of her devastated ex-husbands refused to just walk away out of shame. He hired private investigators. Those investigators started digging into the fake Social Security numbers and quickly realized they were dealing with a ghost. They handed their files over to federal authorities. Suddenly, this wasn't just a local police matter about bad checks or domestic disputes. This was a massive, coordinated federal investigation. The FBI stepped in. They began connecting the dots between Susan in Texas, Mary in Ohio, and Genevieve in Florida. They realized they were hunting the exact same woman. The net was finally closing in, but Dana Lawrence had one last, desperate trick up her sleeve. She knew the authorities were getting close, so she prepared to pull off her most audacious disappearing act yet. She just didn't realize that she had already made a fatal mistake. In the mid-2000s, Dana attempted to execute her standard escape protocol. She gathered the children, packed her bags, and prepared to vanish into a brand new state under a brand new name. But she made one tiny, microscopic error. After 30 years of flawlessly forging documents, she reused a single mailing address from an old alias to forward a piece of bank mail. It was a lazy mistake, a mistake born from pure arrogance. But for the federal agents tracking her, it was the exact smoking gun they needed. Investigators traced that address to an upscale apartment complex on the East Coast. They didn't send a local police unit. They sent a fully coordinated FBI task force. When authorities finally breached her door, they found her sitting calmly at the kitchen table. She didn't scream, she didn't run, she simply looked at the armed agents, offered a cold, empty smile, and introduced herself using yet another fake name, even with federal law enforcement standing in her living room. She refused to break character, but the game was officially over. Fingerprint analysis confirmed what the agents already knew. They hadn't just caught a local fraudster. They had captured the architect of a 30-year psychological crime spree. During her trial, the sheer scale of the devastation was laid bare for the public. Dozens of victims took the stand. Grown men, successful executives, openly wept in the courtroom as they described how she had systematically destroyed their finances and their sanity. But the most heartbreaking testimony came from the children, the kids she had dragged across the country. The children forced to live as fugitives spoke about the immense psychological trauma of never knowing who their mother really was. The judge showed absolutely zero mercy. Dana Lawrence was sentenced to severe federal prison time, effectively ensuring she would never manipulate another human being again. Today, her case remains a legendary study in FBI behavioral profiling. She proved that the most dangerous weapons aren't guns or knives. The most dangerous weapon is a person who understands exactly what you want to hear and is willing to use your own empathy to destroy you. If you found this deep dive into the dark side of human psychology fascinating, hit that subscribe button for more untold true crime stories. Stay sharp, trust your instincts, and we will see you in the next case.